Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode. Today I'm joined by Jennifer Austin from Risky Business. Welcome.
Hi, nice to meet you.
It's nice to have you here. I think we can begin with, can you tell me about Risky Business and what you do?
Well, we do quite a lot. Risky Business actually started off as the first funding accelerator in Romania. That is the first accelerator that was also giving investment. Prior to it, most of the startup programs, they were very much focused on, let's say, community development, this kind of thing, with very little orientation towards the investment side, which it's great, right, to be able to support your community. But at the end of the day, startups, they need to get investment. So this is how we got started. And today, in addition to running several programs focused on local startups and regional startups, we also partner with corporations to design their startup accelerators. For example, we helped to design one for Flutter, which is, I believe, a London Stock Exchange 100 company in entertainment. And we also work with local organizations, for example, cities, to design programs for their needs. And we have also launched programs with partners in Africa.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a bit more about that. You have launched programs a bit all over the world. How has it been? It's different launching a program in Asia than it is in Europe. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Well, when we launch programs overseas, it's usually working with partners, local partners. That's very important. So the way that got started was because when I first came to Romania in 2013, and there was very little in the way of support programs, like tangible, meaningful support programs for startups. So we started building a community accelerator. This was before we started investing money, just to provide support. And what we noticed is that even though there was a lot of talent in the local ecosystem, a lot of resources, there was this mentality that, you needed to go abroad to learn how to do these things. So as we got success in launching various programs and, let's say, proved our methodology, we ended up getting reached out to by partners in different countries just to, they wanted to learn how we did our program, this kind of thing. And it's something we became involved in, really more as let's say, less of a strategic endeavor than just supporting emerging ecosystems to grow, because emerging ecosystems have very different characteristics than, like Silicon Valley or Austin, Texas. And you have to be quite adaptive and creative. And so what we noticed is that a lot of the program methodology that was described online that these, emerging ecosystems were able to access, it wasn't really geared to the realities of their situation. So that's how we got started doing that. And a lot of them have also been focused on social entrepreneurship, this kind of thing, which I'm quite passionate about.
Okay. Can you tell me a bit more about the programs that you have in Romania?
Yes. So this is a little bit of backstory. When we first launched our programs, we were doing them very cohort-based because, there's a lot of learning between participants in the program. And then as, let's say, the ecosystem matured, we changed our style a little bit to address the changing needs of startups and made it more individually based. Startups could join at, let's say, any time of the year, and we'd work with them and support them. And we weren't like pushing them out after a set period of time, like, okay, 3 months is up, bye-bye, this kind of thing. So it was a more personalized concierge approach. We just got done running in Cluj, which is where I'm based, a program for university students and different actors in the university ecosystem focused on commercialization of research and student projects. That was quite exciting. I think 5 of the startups ended up getting funding of between 50,000 to a bit more than that. And the next program that we'll be running is Startup Avalanche, which is with Pennsylvania. I'm not sure if you've heard of this conference, but it's actually one of the leading conferences in Europe. This year's speakers that have confirmed so far are Indiegogo founder Mark Porter and Alan Donan, founder of Creativity. So this is a special program. What we do is we partner with Pennsylvania, this amazing conference, and the startups that are accepted into the program, they get, in addition to like a 3-week boot camp, which is part online, part in person, to help them develop their pitch, improve their investment strategy, this kind of thing. They get the chance to network with all these great speakers at private dinners that they're invited to. Now, we designed this program, the Startup Avalanche program, to be very individualized as well. That's kind of a pattern of us. So instead of doing big cattle calls for a startup competition, which is the norm, as I've noticed in Europe, we really curate the startups, and we're only looking to bring 10. So normally we're getting, between 400 to 800 applications every program, and we just select 10. Now, the reason we do that is because with those 10 startups, not only can we give them really individualized support, but also they have the chance to network one-on-one with these investors and speakers instead of just crowding into a room and just hoping that maybe you'll be able to talk to one investor. So most of our programs are designed around this, it's like high quality, really focused on the individual founders and startups, making sure they get the resources they need. And in Avalanche, this is one we do every year, we've had startups join us from as far away as Australia and Asia. One year we even had a former NASA engineer in the program. So it's quite a diverse program. And in the past, I have been questioned by Romanian media about why I expend all these resources to support founders from, all over the world. And the reason that we do this, besides, well, we want to invest in them, and we want to bring the best startups, is because bringing new perspectives into your startup ecosystem with these exchanges is just really important. And we see this dynamic every time we have the program. It also brings a lot of opportunities. For example, we've seen startups, Romanian startups in the program, end up partnering with startups from other countries, gaining more market knowledge from their markets, and even startups from other countries coming here and making commercial agreements with companies to pilot their products or become users. So it's quite dynamic. So those are the 2 programs that we've been running in the past few months.
Okay, that's very interesting. It sounds very diverse in that sense. You mentioned before that you get around 400 applicants and then you choose 10. How is that process of choosing those 10 startups?
It's very difficult. So we typically do more than 100 interviews. So obviously we analyze the application. And then, the fact is a lot of great founders with great startups, they're just terrible at writing applications. That's why we do so many interviews. So if we find the team to be well-balanced and interesting, we have an interview with them. And even within that interview, we're not necessarily looking for them to have all the answers. How can they? It's an early stage startup. My entire team, we've all been founders before. We've had startups succeed. We've had our own startups fail. And some of them, are still ongoing. So we understand that. What we're looking for is founders that, first of all, are very passionate and dedicated. Obviously, everybody says that. But also we're looking to see, are these people that we can work with? Because again, it's not just about the investment at the end, it's an ongoing relationship. We want to make sure they're going to get value out of the program that we provide. And how to say it diplomatically, I guess there's no way to say it diplomatically. We do an asshole check. We want to make sure that we have people who really want to be there and are going to be respectful to the other participants in the program and add value to them. I came across a very interesting study by MIT many years ago as I was preparing to launch the first program. And it was a ranking of the different value propositions that founders receive from a program. So they did a survey with the founders. It was several hundred of them before they entered a program, asking them what they expected to be the greatest value from the program. And of course, they all answered financing, networking, this kind of thing. But after the program, they administered the survey again, and one of the highest rated value propositions was actually the peer learning opportunities. So having a program that really promotes that has always been important to us. And in fact, we learn a lot from the founders because we are not experts in any one particular industry. So it's quite, I don't want to say magical, that sounds very lame, but I've always believed that when you take ambitious, passionate, intelligent people and put them in a room together, amazing things are going to happen.
And how do you choose the mentors then to provide that thing that is apparently so incredibly valuable for the founders?
So again, it's very individually based. Our programs are all partner driven. So the difference in our approach is that we have somebody from our team that's like a coach, or like you can call it a sponsor of each startup, and guides that process. So since we all have entrepreneurial backgrounds, we're able to support as mentors ourselves. And then what we do is, if we see that the startup needs support with, I don't know, scaling strategies, we will find a mentor that's perfect for them. Because scaling strategy is different if you're a B2B startup or a B2C. If you're in, I don't know, big data, it's different. If you're in security products, it could be different. So if we don't have that perfect mentor in our network, we will find them, and we can usually get them to say yes. So this is our approach. It's a little bit different than just calling all the mentors together. And we designed this approach in part because of our own experiences in our previous lives as entrepreneurs, when, we would go to programs and be looking for some guidance. And in the same room, we'd get 10 different opinions. And it can be very distracting as a founder. It can be very confusing because you don't really fully know the background and quality of experience of each mentor. It's very hard for you to assess if you haven't done the research, if you don't know them, you don't have the experience to evaluate them. So this is why we take this approach of trying to very specifically guide the mentorship of each startup, because we've been in that situation where you just have so many mentors saying so many different things, and it's challenging.
Exactly. It's like navigating in a jungle of opinions. It's not easy, really.
Every investor, and I say this, I'm an investor myself, but I've noticed in Europe, especially, every investor has an opinion on how you should run your startup. But relative to the US, where I'm from, there's a much lower percentage of former entrepreneurs running funds in Europe because of the, let's say, different funding mechanisms. The European Investment Fund being the largest fund of funds here. They tend to select former finance people, bankers, this kind of thing, to run the fund. And that can make it quite challenging for them to really give any valuable insight into what a startup should be doing. So.
Yeah, that's a great point, really. Can you tell me, now you mentioned that you're not doing like the strategy of you're basing the program like you have a one size fit all kind of thing, but can you tell me approximately what should the first thing you do when a startup joins? What happens then?
So It's actually, we start doing this in the interview. We start trying to understand, what are the next milestones they need to achieve. Let's say it's a pre-seed startup, it's received a small round of funding. What is the runway? Let's look at the key KPIs that you need to reach to get to this next level of funding. So what we do is we create a roadmap, a partnership roadmap that we agree to with the startup. It's driven completely together. We both kind of sign off on it as a commitment. Obviously, it's not like a contract. And then, we start seeing how are we going to work together to achieve these goals? What can we help you with? What resources do you need when? For example, a startup that doesn't have a pitch yet should not be put in a room with 100 investors because you have one chance to make a first impression. Whereas a startup that has quite a good pitch, well, they can start networking with investors right off the bat, perhaps. But then we might be looking more how to support them on their technology strategy, this kind of thing. So this roadmap document is really the bedrock of how we, decide what to be doing in programs for each startup.
So it's really about meeting them where they are currently in their journey, essentially.
Exactly. And also, it can bring some level of, let's say, some level of organization to the chaos that is being an early stage startup. Because it can be challenging, right? You have just started developing a product, and if you haven't been through this circus before, you really don't know what to expect. And I would also say that it's also maintaining the relationship with the founders, because sometimes startups might think that an accelerator is supposed to do things that they really don't do. Because at least in Romania, a lot of the programs really overpromise to get startups in the program, and then it's the expectations aren't met. There's confusion, frustration. So we like to make things very clear from the beginning, what support they should be expecting. And I think that this is the right approach, I think, to any business partnership,
Definitely. Can you share a bit more about how to avoid overpromising?
I would say, the first thing is to be honest with yourself as a program. What are your strategic goals? What do you want to get out of this? If you're a co-working space and you're launching the program to try and bring startups into the, building, that's okay. That's great. But be honest with yourself about that. And also be honest with the startups. We launched this program to make our community more dynamic and to bring more startups into this space. It's great just to be very direct, because the best startup founders tend to be a little bit cynical. And if you are just very direct with your own objectives from the beginning, it gets that out of the way. They're not worrying about what are these ulterior motives. And this is also especially important with corporate programs. We do a lot of support to corporations to help them design programs that are actually effective, in bringing startups into their, let's say, community, into their sphere. But that's how you have to start. What are my objectives as a corporation in doing this program? Do I just want marketing? Do I want to find startups to partner with? Is this more something to inspire our innovation employees? This kind of thing. So just being honest with yourself and really getting down to the core of the strategic reasons of why you're doing the program so that you can communicate them directly, and then understanding actually who is your audience and what do they actually need. There are so many programs out there today in Europe, especially, and it's a very crowded market. If you can't clearly say what you're going to offer in 5 bullet points, then you probably haven't thought your program out very well.
Okay, I like that. It feels like that is very good and concrete advice, to have everything that you can offer into a pair of bullet points.
One of the things that we even do for some of the programs that we help partners design, or even our programs, is, on the web page somewhere prominently, there's a button. Why are we doing this? Click on it. These are strategic reasons. Why should you join? These are the values, the value propositions that you're getting. Because there's always a question with startups, especially when they see a corporate partner. Why are you doing this? Are you going to steal my ideas? Is my IP safe? This kind of thing.
Yeah, that's good advice for others, for the ones listening, to also incorporate that on your website and the other thing that you just shared. I want to ask you about a little bit of a different topic. Do you have any insights to share about how to secure funding for a program?
This is very, very hard. So it depends on your ecosystem, right? So in Europe, there are a lot of grants available, from the government, but these can be very complicated to manage. So let's say you get 200,000 in a grant to run a program. You're probably going to have to allocate 50,000 of that just to manage the paperwork and the bureaucracy. So if you're looking at grants from the government, just be very aware of that fact, and the fact that if you don't file something exactly perfect, you can lose quite a lot of money. And there's a lot of weird KPIs that they have sometimes. I have run programs, grants from the government, which I'm very appreciative for. It's great that the governments are supporting programs and entrepreneurial development like this. But, like when I submitted the funding request, their key focus was on very clear KPIs like number of participants, rather than the actual methodology behind the program and the quality, this kind of thing. So sometimes that causes a misalignment of incentives. And you can say the same thing with corporate sponsors. Sometimes it's not really a good fit in terms of alignment of values or strategy. So in terms of raising money for programs, I tend to prefer private donors, like high net worth individuals. Every ecosystem has some of them who have an entrepreneurial background and are willing to chip in. I would say that it's also really important to diversify your sources of funding, because if one company, sponsor, or high net worth individual has a bad year, they might pull back. The other reason to diversify is that it ensures that no one individual or company has an outsized influence in your strategy. And this is really, really important, especially in developing ecosystems, because again, there can be different incentives that you don't always understand the reason companies or people are funding the program. And I would say look at in-kind resources a lot. Let's say you want to start a program and you don't have real estate. You can partner with a co-working space that would like to have a program, or a business that would like to have more activity there, this kind of thing. We've done this in the past to run programs. We had some great partnerships with local real estate developers and so forth that have supported the space, and that cuts down on the cost a lot. Then, in terms of other sources of funding, if you have a team that is capable of providing real value to startups, then there's also no reason that you can't monetize that and develop a services line. So that services line, it might be geared towards later stage startups, or it might be geared at mid-sized companies that would like to develop some innovation activities, events, this kind of thing. So I would say don't just look at sponsors. See how you can use your team's skills to develop a suite of services beyond just the accelerator program. This is going to leave you in a lot healthier financial position, because if you just rely on one big sponsor, it's very easy to get held hostage to their strategic interests. And if they change their goals, if they decide instead of sponsoring startup things that year that they want to sponsor culture things, it leaves you in a very difficult position.
No, for sure. And yeah, I guess a bit think outside the box and be a bit creative in how you can go about it, essentially, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and if you, depending on the type of program that you're trying to create, is it community focused, or is it actually supposed to be like a viable business model, right? Because if you don't have a fund to invest and it's more focused on developing the community, it's more likely that you're going to be able to get contributions from, successful business people. And if you position it more along the lines of an educational program, this kind of thing, they're more likely to, contribute, because who doesn't believe in education, right? And even in, Romania, which is not an incredibly wealthy country, it's easy, I can easily find like 50 business people who can chip in 5,000. Not a lot. So if you keep the request reasonable and low, it's much easier to get to a yes. It's also preventing any major disruptions to the program, or, corporate sponsors can be tricky and have tricky demands.
For sure. I think you have given so much insights and so many interesting aspects of running a program that I haven't really heard before. So I really appreciate that. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you would like to add that you feel like we haven't covered today?
This might sound a bit pedantic. I would say it's very important, besides getting your strategy aligned, invest your time and get some expertise, legal expertise, for developing the program guidelines. It's really important to have a signed program agreement with every startup that joins that outlines expected code of conduct. If, let's say, a mentor does something that makes them feel uncomfortable or inappropriate, what should they do, right? Because it's not just about a single startup. If a mentor or sponsor or something makes advances towards one founder, they're likely to do it to another. Make it very clear that there's a process for that. Make it understood, like, what is expected of them in terms of behavior. One of the challenges that we had in Romania is that the culture wasn't oriented towards follow-up and networking. So in our program documents, we even had examples of, good ways to follow up, send a thank you note, this kind of thing. So even basic etiquette things can help. And then also, if the program requires a fee to join, or you take equity, you really need to have those legal contracts in order. Otherwise, it can leave you in quite a lurch. So I'm not saying to invest hundreds of thousands or even 10,000 into developing these program documents. You can find examples online, modify them for your circumstances, but it's really important, not just for making sure everybody understands what's expected, but for the smooth running of a program, and also to make sure the startups are representing your program well. Because going back to the email thing, if you're a mentor and you spend 3 hours supporting a startup, and then you don't even get a thank you note from them, it's pretty discouraging. And you're less likely to say yes when the program contacts you another time to support a startup. Other things like, how do the startups follow up with you? How should they be engaging with the mentors? This kind of thing. What should they expect from them? It sounds maybe a little bit school marmish, but it's important to have an operational playbook and make the expectations clear. I keep on repeating that, but it's so important.
No, I really agree that it's really important. I feel like it's very smart to have that strategy and really get into the details even before they have happened, like making up every possible scenario of if this happened, this is what we do. So
yes, and putting these documents publicly available on the website, pointing to them so that there's no uncertainty. Of course, you want to, translate it into plain language. It doesn't have to be like, a dense legal document, but it helps to enhance trust. It's so important because people think, oh, I'm doing this program for the community. The startup should be, we're not asking any money of them or equity. The startup should just be happy that they get something, but it actually costs them. It costs them their time. It's an opportunity cost. So if the program isn't delivering, value, it's wasted their time. And that's like the most valuable commodity that an early stage startup has. So on the side of people creating programs, it's really important to be aware of that. And this is why the startups are uncertain, not just issues about, my IP, stealing my ideas, whatever. It's that they really need to keep focused on developing their startup. So yeah, I would say transparency is very, very important. And unfortunately, you don't see that with a lot of programs, not necessarily because they're trying to deceive anyone, but just because they don't realize how important it is and how many questions startups have. The fact is, I've heard horror stories of terrible programs. And it's unfortunate. And even very experienced programs that add a lot of value, if they don't make the expectations clear from the beginning, it can get them into trouble. Like, I know recently there was a conference that had some investment competition, and then they revoked the investment from the winner because they had Russian investors. That's a policy that probably should have been made clear from the beginning. Participation of startups that are, having sanctioned investors in their cap table. So all of these things, I could go on and on with horror stories, but I won't.
Yeah, but it's good to be aware of all the different things and problems that can occur. So it's really good to have that kind of legal protection net behind you.
Yes, and I mean, like I said, I'm from the US, and coming to a developing country and now working in many developing countries, it's such a difference. The knowledge is not as well developed on what these programs should do and what's a good practice and what's a bad practice. It's very unclear. I mean, I remember when I first started our first program here, I was literally going around and doing workshops with aspiring founders on what is equity, how does it work? Because there had been investors that were, asking for like 51% of the company for 10 to 20,000, and startups actually taking that and not understanding what it implies for their cap table, just all these strange things. So really get to know the horror stories in your ecosystem so that you can address these concerns. So you kind of have to get in the muck and get a little bit dirty to know how to shape a program.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that is a good note to end it on. Thank you so much for taking the time and talking to me today. And thank you for sharing all these really, really valuable insights.
Thank you for having me. And I look forward to hearing more great podcasts from your community.